exciting to see that you're also interested in STEM careers. I work at Waymo, as I mentioned. Waymo is part of Alphabet, which is the same company that owns Google, and we make self-driving cars. So I'll talk a little bit about what that means. I'll also talk a little bit about my role in that company, and you can ask questions as you like about what we do or what I do or what I did in the past. I'm happy to talk about all of that. So stop me if you have things as we go. I'm going to share my screen because I have a little deck. All right, can everybody see that? I'm going to guess yes. So disclaimer is we don't use Zoom at Google, so this is actually my first time on Zoom. So I'm a really newbie, but thank you for your patience. Okay, so if we can see the deck, I am a product analyst at Waymo, so I'm not an engineer. My role is in data science, and I work in the data science portion of the company that primarily answers questions that product would have. So if you think of there being sort of like engineering, like people who make the car like literally drive itself, and then people who make sure that that car that drives itself is doing the things that people would want it to do, I tend to work a little bit on the latter, the stuff that makes the experience good for users and a good business. But I do work a lot with engineers as well, and I work on like what makes the car pull over well or what makes the car route well. So it's a little bit fuzzy, but I am in data science. My background then is in statistics. I do a lot of data analysis and data visualization. And my role that I came through at Google, I was not always in self-driving cars. I've done a lot of things in the past, but they've all had that same basic structure, which is that I work with data, I work with analytics, I use the information that we collect from the car and from the trips that people take to make better decisions in the company. That's what I'm trying to do. Waymo's mission is to make it safe and easy for people and things to get to where they're going. The Waymo driver, which is what we call the computer that's in the car, has the potential to improve the world's access to mobility while saving thousands of lives now lost in traffic accidents. So I think a basic tenet of Waymo is that we think that a computer driver could actually be a much safer driver than most people, at least the average person. And therefore, getting those cars out on the road instead of having people driving them is an opportunity to save a lot of people's lives. So what is fully self-driving technology? It's kind of confusing because people use this term in a lot of different ways. But when we talk about it, what we mean is that fully self-driving technology is able to move people and things from point A to point B with no human driver in the vehicle at all. So if the car were completely empty, it could go about its day and everything would be just fine. If there is a person in it, again, it could go about its day. That person could do nothing special, like it could be paying no attention at all, and the car would still be able to drive. Okay, so I'm going to share a little video here.
Driving by itself. No driver, Daddy. See?
That is nuts. It's pretty crazy. It's like there's a ghost at the steering wheel. I kind of feel like royalty being paraded around this thing.
School zone.
Look at these guys. Looking over.
Are they?
No driver.
No!
What?
So Waymo thing is cruising.
Oh, it's a pretty sharp turn. You made it pretty smoothly. Thank you. Do I say thank you? Here, you made it, and I didn't have to drive.
Yeah. All right, so what exactly do we mean when we say fully self-driving? So like you saw in the video, there's literally no one in the driver's seat. Unlike other technology that may ask you to take over during your ride, like say like Teslas right now sometimes do that, Waymo is always the driver from the beginning to the end, and no one is required to ever sit at the wheel. There's a scale that defines us. So on one hand, you have driver assist systems. So on this line, it's kind of a continuum. It's a spectrum from the most self-driving technology to the least. So on the very, very left where it says 1, driver assistance, it means the car helps you a little bit do driving. This could be something like cruise control, which has been around for many decades. And on the right-hand side where it says 5, it's what we're talking about, which is that the car can drive itself with absolutely no human involvement, so completely independently. So how can self-driving technology help us today? Another little video.
Say hello to Waymo, the world's most experienced driver. The Waymo driver is what we call our self-driving technology. It has over a decade of real-world experience and has driven millions of miles. With Waymo 1, we can make it safer and easier for you to get around, so you can spend more time doing what you love. And with Waymo Via, the same driver with the same deep experience can also deliver your packages or save you a trip to the dry cleaners. Or if you run a business, Waymo Via can help you transport whatever you need, making sure shipments arrive right when they're supposed to. This is the Waymo driver, a driver that's reimagining transportation for all of us.
Okay, so I have a question for you. But first, I see that you have some questions for me, and I just wanted to answer a few of them that have popped up in the chat. So someone asked, is this car a Tesla? No, that one is not a Tesla. Tesla also is working on self-driving technology. Waymo is not the only company that's working on this. It's something that a lot of people think is really important. So there are actually a lot of companies that you could do similar work with, and Tesla is one of those. We do not use Tesla cars. We've used a variety of cars over the time. And I think the next one that we're buying is a Jaguar car. So some of them are really nice cars. But basically they're all cars that have are either electric or hybrid because you need that battery in the car. And so we could probably use a Tesla to do this, but right now we don't. We pick a car and then all of our vehicles for a while use the same car. And then we decide again what car we need to use the next time that we have a release come out. But this is not a Tesla. Tesla doesn't have self-driving technology right now in their cars. They have an assistive technology that you still have to pay attention, but they're working on fully autonomous technology as well. That was a car. Those were real videos, so there was no special effects in them at all. It was just a camera that was in front of the cars as it was giving people rides. I've taken a lot of rides in Waymo cars. My kids have taken rides to the park in Waymo cars. We operate in Chandler, Arizona as a ride sharing service, kind of like Uber. And so lots and lots of people have taken rides in self-driving cars with absolutely no one else in the car. And they use it just like you would an Uber or Lyft. So this happens already all the time. We have cars going and yeah, people were just being recorded when they were having those rides. With their permission, obviously. They knew they were being recorded. It is being used basically as a taxi right now. So it's a ride-sharing service, kind of like Uber. In some of our cars, we do have a driver, but they're not driving. They're just sort of sitting in that seat, and they have a laptop. They're there in case there is a problem, which usually there's not, but it's sometimes nice to have a person there. And they're mostly just taking notes on their laptop. So if they see something that looks funny to them, they take notes, and that's why there's someone in a vehicle. But there's usually not when we're talking about self-driving technology. There are no cars right now for sale. And the reason is that these things change a lot. We develop new technology all the time. And so we're doing a lot of work on the cars and on the computer system that goes inside of them every day. So since things change so frequently, we don't want to sell that to someone right now and then have to like be, showing up at their house and changing things as needed. There is a potential that in the future you could buy a self-driving car, but one of the nice things about self-driving cars is you don't really need to have them at home, right? Like if you can just hail a car at any moment and it'll show up at your house pretty soon, it doesn't really make sense to keep one in your garage. So a lot of people think that self-driving technology will actually lead to fewer people owning vehicles and more people sharing vehicles, because with such a large fleet that we'd like to see, they don't need to be at your house. We can just send them as needed and then, algorithmically determine where you need to go and where the car should go next. and make it convenient for everyone. But who knows? You might have a self-driving car before you guys have your driver's licenses. Okay, is that pretty much? Oh, how do you pay? There's an app, just like Uber. So right now people do pay for rides, and it's a little bit cheaper than Uber, but it's pretty much the same flow. Yeah. Oh, how many hours can the car drive by itself? So the car can drive by itself pretty much indefinitely. Like I think it could keep going forever. Right now, though, they're electric cars, so they need to be charged. They just like a gasoline car would need gas. The car needs to be charged, so it actually returns to its base when it's ready, and they charge it at this garage, and they just send different cars out. So there's more. We have more cars than are on the road most of the time. Like Tesla, yeah. So you would need to charge it kind of like a Tesla. All cars need some kind of energy. Electric cars need to be charged. Gas cars need gas. So they would have to stop for that. Can you ride it to Reno, Nevada? I'm interested. Exactly, you're going to Reno, Nevada. Right now, we are.
I was just going to explain the Reno, Nevada. We had a word problem where we traveled from Reno, Nevada to Paris in a boat and a plane, and so I think that students in my math, that was one of our math problems. So I think yeah.
Got it. So the car could do that. There's nothing about the technology that would say that we couldn't specifically go to Reno, Nevada, or it couldn't make it that far or something. Right now, it is highly regulated, which means there are a lot of rules and laws that governments have around self-driving cars because they want to be really careful. You can imagine that this could be a really dangerous technology if people aren't very careful with what they do with it. And so not every city and every state is fine with us having cars that don't have a driver on the road yet. This is something we're working on because we think that our technology is already really safe. But it totally makes sense for there to be rules. And so not every city and state between Chandler or California and Reno, Nevada allows us to drive on their roads. And so the strict answer is no, you cannot drive in a self-driving car right now to Reno, Nevada. But in the future, I think you probably could. What happens when you drive it when it is going? Oh, like if you grabbed the wheel, what would happen? So right now, cars do have to have a steering wheel. You're not allowed to have a car without a steering wheel on the road right now. If you grab the wheel, it mostly makes the car pull over. So no matter kind of what you're doing, the car would think you thought something was wrong and it would pull over as soon as possible. So you couldn't just sort of take the wheel and steer it wherever you wanted unless we disengaged it. So if it got stuck and someone needed to drive it in an emergency situation, we could make that happen. There is a way to do that. There's a person you can contact in the car. But if you try to grab the wheel and let's steer the car, it'll just pull over to the side of the road. Yes, there is an app. It's the Waymo app. You can probably download it, but unless you live in Chandler, you won't be able to actually use it right now. People who work for Waymo can use the cars around California, but you'd have to work for Waymo or live in Chandler, which is near Phoenix, Arizona. I answer that. Okay, so back to my question for you. How would you spend your time in a self-driving car? So you might imagine that you can go on road trips as an adult and not have to drive the car and not have to have your parents drive the car. How do you think that that would change the way that you act in a car? What would you do if the car drove itself? And you can type in the messenger. I don't know how to, the raising hand things is beyond me. I would go get food every day. Cool, cool. Lots of food answers. That's really interesting because delivery is also a use case that we're working on. So you wouldn't necessarily have to go get the food. We could have the car go and pick up the food on its own and bring it to your house. So sort of like Uber Eats, but without a person involved. Okay, so we have some skepticism. I would be at the passenger seat just to make sure it doesn't crash. It's actually really funny because a lot of people who ride in the car, the first few minutes they're in the car are really nervous because it's a car with no driver and it looks kind of spooky. Like the guy in the video said, it looks like there's like a ghost driving the car. People are really nervous. But then after a few minutes, everyone starts checking their phone, looking out the window. It feels much more comfortable than people expect it to. So most people actually aren't very nervous for very long. But you might be the exception. You might keep an eye on the road. There's a question, is it automatic like a Tesla? So our car is more automatic than a Tesla currently is. So Teslas, like, for example, on the highway can drive themselves for some amount of time. But Tesla, if you sort of read the fine print and pay attention to what they're telling you to do, you can't just like go read a book. You really need to be paying attention to what you're doing in a Tesla. It's a little bit different. And this is a really confusing thing because different companies use like self-driving in different ways. They'll use that term, and it is a very confusing term, much like data science. It can mean many things. That spectrum that we looked at from 1 to 5, where 1 meant the car maybe helps you a little to drive, and on 5, like the car can drive itself. We're aiming for 5. Tesla right now is not at 5. But they do have a team who's working on that technology as well. They haven't released it. Does the door open by itself? Yes, the door can open by itself. So when there's no driver in the car, you can open the door on your own. Also, the car can open and close the door. I think often we wait for the passenger to open the door and close the door just to make that experience better for them because no one wants to feel like the door is going to close on them. Would you need seatbelts in case a driver made a mistake and hit your car? Yeah, that's true. I mean, things can happen. Like we can't control all the other drivers on the road. There have been autonomous vehicles that got into crashes. It's, I think, almost always the other driver's fault. But yeah, you have to wear a seatbelt because that's the law.
Yeah, Tiffany, that was my response to another student, actually.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see. Oh, yeah, still a good question. Okay, I wish I had that car too. I don't get to have one at my house either.
Another reminder that the chat is not meant to be used for anything other than asking questions or making comments, guys. It's hard to see all the questions when there's random messages in there.
Okay. How does the Waymo app work in San Bruno? Right now, you could download the app, but you can't hail a ride in San Bruno right now unless you're working for Waymo. So you can come work for Waymo, but not yet. Could it drive at night? Yes, the cars drive at night. They're not like people. They don't use light as a primary way of seeing. They use lasers spinning around really fast, and we'll actually get to that in a minute. But they can see better than people at night, and they drive just fine. Okay, so I'm going to move on because I think some of these questions. Oh, interesting question about the pandemic. I will get to that at the end. Okay, so that's my. All right, so self-driving technology enables people to have more time back when they don't have to focus on driving and can instead take the back seat and do whatever they want, from catching up with friends and family to doing homework or maybe taking a quick nap. So in California, especially, a lot of people commute a long way, and that for a lot of people is like totally lost time. You might even commute a lot to get to school, or you might drive with your parents after school to run errands. That's time that right now we just sit kind of doing very little in the car. But Waymo thinks that that time could be family time too, or time that you spend doing other things that you like to do. So in Waymo self-driving cars, we also have in-car screens that allow you to see what we see along the way. So riders can check out these screens to see what the vehicle is seeing and thinking, and check out how far they are away from their destination, or play music using the feature. So the screen that you're seeing right now, where it has a little car, that's you. It shows you where you are along your route. It also shows you some things that you could do to entertain yourself while you're waiting. The little smiley face to frown face that you see come up is a request that you tell us how your ride went. So if there was something about it that you felt uncomfortable, we want to know that. And you can choose the frowny face. Most people are very happy with our rides. So the vast majority of people do choose the happy face. How would you benefit from self-driving technology? Can you guys think of anything sounded like it was a largely food-based request. Is there any other thing that you think would be really nice if we had self-driving technology? Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples. So this is Santos. This gentleman is a veteran who gave up his keys a few years ago as he got older and was no longer safe to drive. Now Santos's wife drives him to doctor's appointments in her car. He stays active, engaged through a dynamic range of activities like group discussions, classes, workouts at the Foundation for Senior Living near his home in Phoenix, Arizona. So Santos is an active guy. But while Santos has access to transportation, many other people in Phoenix who no longer drive do not. For instance, they might not have another person living with them who can take them to all those things. Self-driving technology could help these people get where they need to go. There's also people like Max here. Max is legally blind and therefore cannot drive to the grocery store by himself. He has to rely on public transportation or someone else to drive him. Max believes that self-driving technology holds the promise to completely change transportation, especially for people like him. Here's a video of Max and his girlfriend riding in a Waymo.
I've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, I've hiked across the Grand Canyon, I've swam from Alcatraz, but there are things that I just plainly can't do. I still can't drive myself to the grocery store. A really significant challenge of being blind is the issue of transportation because I can't drive. Self-driving cars can add that freedom that I don't have. From a self-esteem level, that'd be great, and from a practical level, it'd be life-changing.
Let's talk self-driving.com.
Lastly, self-driving technology can give all people time back to do other things instead of driving, like we talked about before. So Americans spend 50 minutes on average commuting back and forth every day from work. I think in California, it's probably more. This man here, Denny, believes that fully self-driving cars could give people back time in their days, time without distractions they could use to reflect and think about what they want to accomplish in their day or just relax before they get home. Okay, so let's design our own self-driving car. I want to just check out the questions. Does anyone have any quick questions? Let me read back. Okay, how has the pandemic impacted business? Really great question. The pandemic has impacted almost everything. So we stopped driving the cars in Chandler in Arizona as a ride sharing service in March, and we've just started that back up again. The reason was actually not because it's autonomous cars, but that it's because it's cars. And we wanted to be sure that when we had people coming in after other people came into the cars, that we were cleaning them. And it was really hard to clean between each rider. Obviously, that's not what every car sharing service does, but we wanted to be very, very careful. We don't really offer like so many rides a day that it was impossible, but it did make it really, really hard to operate the company. And so we just shut down that service and continued driving cars without passengers, paying passengers in them for that time. But now we've started back up again. We talked a lot about this because obviously having no person in the vehicle lowers people's risk of getting a disease pretty significantly. But that inability to know when the car needed to be cleaned was something that we're still working on. We can check it. We have ways of doing that. And we're talking about how we can actually make self-driving technology really work better for people in a pandemic than other types of options would. Yeah, good question. Can it go through a drive-through? Right now, I don't think it does, but it could. I think that it's hard for us to like you can't put a waypoint in a drive-through right now. It's like a logistics thing. It's not a thing that a self-driving car couldn't do. Can it read your voice? It can listen to your voice, kind of. There's an option to do that for people who don't have other ways of interacting with that screen that's inside the car. But most people use it just by pressing the buttons. There is a person who you can also, if you just press a button on that screen, talk to if you're having like literally any kind of issue, and that's a real person as well. But the car is not actively listening to your conversations when you're inside, for obvious reasons, and so it doesn't necessarily pick up voice commands. That's not something that we're right now focusing on doing. But if you were a person who couldn't like read the screen, there are options for working with that with your voice. Yeah. Does it have Wi-Fi? I don't think so, actually. Not in the car. I mean, you could use cell service, but I don't think that right now the cars have Wi-Fi. Are they different colors? Right now the cars are all literally the same model of car. So I believe they are all white. But I mean, we can make them any color we wanted. There were cars a while back that had wraps on them that were like cool pictures. They're probably the cars that you've seen Waymo having. They're like little, like they're kind of shaped like this. And they were really colorful. Oh yeah, the accessibility features are one of my favorite parts too. We actually do a lot to make sure that people with various like needs can use the cars from beginning to end. So from the point at which they open the app to the point when they leave the car, that's really important part of this for us. Where are they located? So right now we have most of our cars that pick up paying passengers are in Arizona near Phoenix. There's a suburb called Chandler, so we refer to it as Chandler. So that's where most of the people who ride in Waymo are riding. There are cars that you probably see around all the time around the Bay Area. Those are cars that you cannot hail from the Bay Area, but people who work for Waymo ride in them a lot. we take them everywhere. But I think those are the two main places, and there are also other places located around the country where we do testing. Okay, cool. All right, so let's design our own self-driving car. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how these cars work. So as humans, we rely on many of our senses to help us drive, especially seeing, hearing, and touching, so that we can stay alert to what's around us and make decisions based on that. So, you know, we have eyes. We use those a lot for driving. We have ears. The car does not have those things, but it has lots of other stuff. So the same is true for a self-driving car. Just like humans, it uses a set of sensors that enable it to navigate through the world. It includes LiDAR, which is a special type of sensor that uses light pulses to measure the distance of objects. Cameras, like you all have on your phones and devices, which are really helpful to see lots of colors and details, also provide some information. We also have radar, which helps measure speed of objects and as well even in bad weather conditions. So combined, they give our Waymo driver a 360-degree view of the world. So all around the car it can see. Obviously, if you're a person in the car, you can't look all around the car at the same time, but our cars can. And it has a set of eyes so powerful that we often see instances on the road where our sensors pick up things before our test drivers even see them. Our test drivers are that person that I mentioned is sometimes in the car just kind of observing how the car is working. Okay, so next we have software, the brain of the self-driving technology. It uses all the data that the sensors collect to make decisions about what the self-driving car should do next. So to make these decisions, we consider 4 questions. Question 1, where am I? Before our cars drive to any location, our team builds our own detailed 3-dimensional map that highlights information such as roads, curbs, sidewalks, lane markers, crosswalks, traffic lights, stop signs, other road features. For trucking, so we also have semi-trucks, the mapping process is the same for our passengers' vehicles, but the actual maps themselves will be a little bit different, as there are some things that trucks care about that cars that carry people don't. A few examples would be truck-specific speed limits, no truck lanes, and physical limitations like clearances under bridges. So to answer where am I, we take these detailed maps and combine them with live information from our sensors so we can compare what we see now to what we've seen in the past and is on the map. And it gives our vehicle a much better idea of exactly where it is. Question 2 is what's around me? And our sensors and software scan constantly for objects around the vehicle, like people, pedestrians, cyclists, other vehicles, roadwork, things in our way, obstructions, and continually read traffic controls from traffic lights and railroad crossing gates to temporarily stop signs. There's a lot of complexity here to work with. So think about how different pedestrians could look, for example. We are all different sizes and shapes. We have different postures. We have different gestures. We wear different clothing. It's not easy to tell the computer exactly what to expect when they're looking for a pedestrian. But our software can understand all these variations and label them all as pedestrians. Now that we know what's around us, we also want to know what these objects around us are going to do next. So we want to predict what they might do. Our software predicts the movements of everything around us based on information such as their speed and trajectory, but also what we've seen objects do in similar situations in the past. So the software then uses this information to predict the many possible tasks that other things that we see on the road might take. Based on all this information, the Waymo driver, the car, determines the exact trajectory, that means their path, speed, which lane to use, the steering maneuvers that are needed to progress along that route safely. Our deep understanding of the world is what enables us to confidently handle complex situations, even rare and unusual things you might only come across once in a lifetime of driving. All right. So that was how the sensors work. I'm going to stop here and ask if you have any questions, because how self-driving technology works is obviously very complicated. When you first get in the car, do they ask you where you want to go? So right now, the way that you tell the car that is in the app. So there's an app on the phone that you say where you are, where you want to start, and where you want to end your trip. The car will come pick you up at the place you want to start, and it will plan to take you to the place where you said you want to finish. If you are in the car and decide you want to change where you're going, you can do that. You can do that on the screen in the car or in the app. So it's possible. Has it ever crashed? Waymo cars have been in accidents. As far as I know, it's never been our fault. So we can get rear-ended just like any other car, just sitting still at a stoplight. But our car is very careful, and so it's, as far as I know, never been our fault. You can Google me on that, but we are pretty confident that our cars are safe, and they do not crash. Does the car smell good? Good question. We clean the cars a lot, so the car smells good. It smells maybe a little bit like cleaning products, but they're not like strong. It's not a strong chemical smell or anything. It smells like a clean car. I believe all self-driving cars accidents have been the fault of the different car being driven by a human. Yeah, I think that's true too. I haven't checked lately, but as far as I know. How much does it cost to ride? So the rides right now are a little cheaper than like an Uber. So it depends on where you're going, how long your trip is, as to how much it costs. We are hoping that because there's no driver in the car, and so you don't have to pay a person for their time, that this would ultimately be cheaper than a car where you expect someone to be working for you and waiting for the rides full time. But you know, that's kind of in the future. We're only like a very small service right now. There are actually lots of partners that we're working with that would give people rides for free. So one thing that we're really interested in is when people take other types of public transportation, like the bus, but then they live like maybe a mile from the bus stop, we want to help them get from the bus stop to their house so they don't have to walk a mile. Like if you went to the grocery store, got on a bus, and then came close to your house, you don't have to walk all the way home. And so we do have partnerships with like the Transportation Authority in the Phoenix area. And they actually subsidize those trips, so they're very, very cheap for people to take. So for some trips, it might cost the consumer basically nothing. It right now costs the consumer nothing. How much would you pay if the car ride is 2 hours? You know what? It would be really hard to have a 2-hour car ride right now in our car. Not sure. I think probably like more than $50. We don't really want people like riding recreationally just to hang out in a self-driving car. We are really trying to get people to go from a place that they are to a place they need to be. So I think as people ride in self-driving cars a little bit more, it'll become just much more normal. The first few times it's really exciting, and then it starts just feeling like a car. So I don't think you probably want to be in a self-driving car for 2 hours any more than you want to be in any other car for 2 hours, but it could do it. what happens when someone broke into the car? Like if someone broke it, like robbed the car. So the car doors are shut and locked when people are inside. It uses your phone to know that you are the person who hailed the car, so it won't open the door to just anyone. It would be very hard to break in. And they are parked in a safe, like enclosed, like inside space at night. So we haven't had this problem. Someone once came and tried to break a camera, but it didn't work. I wouldn't do that. The cameras spin really fast. They could hurt like your hand. But we haven't really had a problem with people vandalizing the cars because they aren't really in a situation where they would be vandalized. If they are, we have a lot of records of who did it. So you would not get away with it. It's the most surveilled car. I would not recommend that. Does the car have air conditioning? Yep, it's very comfortable to be in. They're very spacious, nice and cool. You can control the temperature. You can control the music. You have a lot of control. Okay. All right, so I wanted to tell you if I have time. Do I have time or am I out of time? Okay. I wanted to tell you a little bit about my role and how I got into my role at Waymo, and how you might get into a role similar to mine if that's something that interests you. So like I said, I am a product analyst that's in a department of a company called data science. Data science uses data and information to make data-driven decisions that companies can use to do their job well, to keep people safe, to make money, whatever it is that their primary concern is. I did not come into data science very directly. I would not say that I would recommend my career trajectory as your plan. But here's the thing. Data science is actually a fairly new discipline. It's not something that people had like when my parents were deciding on jobs. In fact, it's not a major that I could have chosen when I was in college. Data science didn't exist. Now, there are lots of universities that offer data science programs, but people who are my age usually came in from something like sort of similar but different to data science. I came in through social sciences. So when I was in college, I took my first political science class. And political science, oh yeah? Political science in the house. Political science, yeah, nice. Okay, well you can come work away. No? Okay. So it's a little bit different than civics that you might have done in school. So it's not about like memorizing the capitals of states and the president of the United States. It's not about knowing like how many houses, how many people are in the House of Representatives. Political science, when you go to college for it, actually is pretty quantitative. That means it involves statistics and numbers a lot. So we use a lot of data to try to make inferences about how the world works. So in political science, in the first class I took, it was a development economics class, which has to do with like how countries go from being poor to being richer, or how people pull themselves out of poverty when they're in a developing country. And my professor gave us a printout, a sheet with a whole table of data on it and a whole bunch of columns of data, and said, what do you see in this data? And I was looking at it and I saw some surprising things. Just kind of eyeballing it, I could see that the more rural the area was, the higher people's risk of hunger was, for example, which I thought was really surprising, because if you're in a rural area, you just like farm, right? Like I was young and I didn't know any better, and this didn't make sense to me. I was like, that's really bizarre. Like, why would you have higher hunger when you were in a rural area and lower hunger when you were in an urban environment? And so we were looking at this piece of paper and just trying to like look at patterns. And some of them were really surprising and made you think like, what additional information would I want to have to know more about this question? And that just really excited me. I thought it was fun. I thought it was just really interesting to look for patterns in data. And that's why I actually chose to change my major from architecture, which I had originally come in on, to political science. And that's what I did for the rest of college. Nice. I did go to graduate school also for political science, where I also did a lot of quantitative work with twinsies. And I did a lot of statistics in that too. I did a lot of economics, and I did a lot of forecast modeling. So when I was in graduate school, I worked for a bunch of other I worked in a lot of other environments. I worked in media. So I worked for CBS News doing election prediction. I worked in finance. I worked for the NASDAQ Stock Exchange, where I did modeling on high frequency trading, which is a type of stock market trading. But ultimately, I kind of came back to politics. I worked in the Obama campaign, where they were just starting up. You too? Nice. Where they were just starting up their analytics team.
Might be the same person, and then our paths
Nice.
converted.
We were just at the end there.
Way back in like 2007.
Yeah, funny. So in the Obama campaign, there's always been analysts who work in politics, but the Obama campaign was one of the first presidential campaigns that had a really substantial department of people whose job it was to get data and analyze that data and tell the campaign what we thought that they should do next based on that data. We were in a little tiny room in the back, and we were in the headquarters. I worked full-time for that campaign for a year, which is the normal amount of time that you kind of work for a campaign. We won, which was great. And we went on to kind of do a variety of things, the people who worked in that analytics team. I went to go work for a company called YouGov, which is an analytics survey house. So they run surveys that you might see on like the news about people's public opinion. And then came to Google. So I actually worked in Geo, which is the part of Google that does maps, for about 4 years before coming to Waymo. I actually took a quick stint in venture capital during that time too. Google has a venture capital firm. And then I've been at Waymo for about 6 months. So this is still pretty new. This part is still pretty new to me. I think one of the nice things about data science that my story sort of illustrates is that it is a field that you can get into and then really find a lot of different things that interest you and still be doing kind of the same job. So once you learn to understand data, to visualize that data, to ask good questions, to figure out what decisions people need to make and how you can help them make those decisions. Learning all the skills around like how to make experiment work, how to do like good work with reporting and helping people understand and teach people about what you're working on. That is actually a very transferable skill. That's a skill that you can use in so many different environments, that if you find yourself in one place, if you work in self-driving cars for a while and decide this is not for you, you can go work in finance. You can go work somewhere else entirely. There are a lot of people who do data science in nonprofits. So you can find like a cause that you really love and go help them do that better. I think nonprofits are actually one of the places where data science is exploding right now. People really, really need to see what parts of their programs are working and what parts aren't, so that they can be very effective with the money that they have. So it's one of those professions that I obviously did a lot of different things. You might not need to do all of those various things to get to the place where you want to be. But it's worked okay for me to not have a very strong plan and to just keep doing the next thing that I find interesting. Okay, so I'm looking at questions. Okay, so when you park, how does the car know when the other car's in the parking? When you park, how does the other car? I think this might be a question about like, how do you park the car without hitting other cars? Is that basically it? So yeah, the car very much knows where the other cars are. When they're driving and when they're parking and when they're stopped, the sensors around them see all cars and track them all the time, even parked cars, even bushes, like even small animals. We're very good at avoiding squirrels. So, parking is actually not hard in the sense that like we don't know where the other cars are. It's a little bit hard because pulling into a tight spot can be tricky, but it's not hard for us to know where the cars are. I want to ride one. Cool. Well, come work for Waymo, or the next time you're in Phoenix, anyone can download the app in Phoenix and just immediately drive right in a Waymo car. What if one of the wheels pop? Okay, so like if there's a maintenance problem on the car, if one of the wheels pops or something else happens in a car, they're cars, so this can happen. The car is very good at knowing when something's wrong with it. It probably knows that something's wrong way before you do. Also, they're very closely maintained. So most people take their car to the shop like occasionally if something's wrong or if they need to get an oil change. These cars get checked out pretty much every day by professionals. So it's very unlikely that something like surprising is going to happen that we had no way of predicting. But if you got a flat tire, what the car would do is see that it had a flat tire, pull over to the side of the road. It would automatically call a person whose job it is to monitor these cars, and we would immediately send another car to come pick you up. So you probably wouldn't have to wait very long. You'd be safe. We would pull over in the next safe location, and there would just be another car there to pick you up and take you to your destination, if that's what you wanted. If you wanted to just get out, you could do that too. But obviously, like, you know, this could happen just like any other car, and we do have ways to deal with that. When does it come out so people can buy it? I don't think there's a plan right now to sell them to consumers directly. There are lots of reasons for that. One is that they'd be really expensive right now. Another is that they change a lot, and so people would have to be okay with us like constantly coming to their car and making changes to it, which I don't think anyone would like. Also, we just don't think that necessarily people all need to own a self-driving car, because one of the nice things about it is it can just like show up without needing another person involved at any moment that you hail it. Is there math? There is math. In my job especially, there's math. So statistics, you probably haven't taken a lot of classes in statistics, but it's a subset of math. It's a part of math. And it has to do a lot with like probabilities and like modeling things. That means forecasting things based on how likely you are to think that they'll happen. We also do a lot of reporting, which just says like, you know, how safe is our car relative to a human driver, for example. And that it requires a lot of like figuring out the data that we have about how safe our car is, the data we have about how safe people are, and then making as close a comparison as we possibly can based on sort of mathematical formulas. But you probably haven't really been exposed yet to the type of math that I tend to use on a regular basis. Engineers who work on these cars also use math, but it's a little bit different. It tends to have a little bit more to do with like algorithms. Why can you not drive Waymo cars in California? So we do drive Waymo cars in California. We just don't have a ride-hailing service. I think the major reason is just that California was not going to give us permission to do that. So we decided to go to Phoenix. I mean, I think that it's completely reasonable that governments want to protect everyone on the road from cars that, you know, wouldn't be safe. I don't think it's that they think our car isn't safe, but they're just being very, very careful about allowing cars to drive with people in them, and for companies to make money on that. They want to make sure that the incentives are aligned, which means that if we started worrying more about how much money we were making in a car sharing service in California, then we might not do as good a job, I think is the fear. But I think it's one of those things that like these will change over time. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a car sharing service in California at some point. How did it feel when you first rode one? Oh, great. My first ride was perfect. Occasionally people have problems where like the car drops them off farther from where they want to be than they'd like it drops them off at the wrong entrance to Target or something. Most people's rides are pretty good. Occasionally, like maybe people complain about the car stopping more quickly than they like. I mean, not all the time, but it's one of the things that people sometimes say. But you know, most people really have a good experience. My first ride was a very good experience. Where are the Waymo cars? So they're driving a lot of the time. We have garages that are filled with Waymo cars around various places, like in the area. Sometimes they are parked at like rental car garages occasionally, but mostly they're in Google-owned spaces. We have a big one at Rails, which is the place where I work. It's where Google X is located. What if the car runs out of batteries on the road? Yeah, so that wouldn't happen accidentally because the car very much knows how much charge it has left, and so it wouldn't keep driving. It would stop accepting passengers and go get charged.
Not joking. Look.
Does anyone have, is anyone interested in data science? Like, does that sound like a fun field to anyone? I know it's something that probably like as elementary school, you haven't probably covered a lot yet.
I will say data is really, sixth grade is when data, if you're not supposed to be talking, please be muted.
Oh shit.
I believe that sixth grade is where data really becomes a big thing, and then seventh grade is where probability, like the very basics of probability, become a major standard.
Yeah, that sounds right. I think I took statistics for the first time in high school, so you guys are way ahead of the curve.
Think about for all of the students, I mean, whether you're in third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, when we think of statistics, it's also really anytime that you are making a choice in your classroom, like maybe you're going to vote on which Go Noodle character to use, and that's actually still using statistics, definitely on a smaller scale. But to help you understand what she's talking about, graphs and comparing things and looking at what has the majority, what has the littlest part, what has the biggest part, how do we change that? That's a lot of what in third grade, fourth grade, that's kind of the extent, I think, of what statistics would really be.
Yeah, good point. I should explain a little what like I do exactly. So if you, let's say that you were trying to decide, let's say you were trying to decide what to wear for the day. Like you live in a place where it can be hot, or it can be cold, it can rain, it cannot rain. Like you don't know for certain what the weather is going to be, but you have to make a choice. You have to wear something, and you can't carry everything in your backpack with you. So you take as much information as you can. You go look at the weather forecast, maybe. You look outside. You try to remember what happened yesterday and whether today kind of looks like that. You think about what season it is and what's likely to happen, and then you make a choice. Your choice might be wrong. You might decide to wear a raincoat and then it doesn't rain, or you might decide not to and then it will definitely rain. But your choice is what we call probabilistic. That means you're trying to decide what's the most likely thing to happen and then making the best decision for that likelihood. You might also make like choices that kind of are backups. So if you didn't think it was going to rain, but maybe you could like stick a little umbrella in your backpack to make sure that you have that option. You think about like what else might happen and what you could do if those things happen just in case. So that's pretty much what I do, is I'm trying to figure out like what choice are we trying to make? What information do I have? What could I do in the case the most likely thing happens? And then what could I do to keep myself safe or the passenger safe, even if things that are unlikely to happen do happen? Does that make sense?
I think I'll also say that data into something that you guys might do, like if you play a game, you see a lot of data. I usually like to do games when I'm teaching probability, especially like if you're playing Monopoly and you want to make sure that you don't land on the space that says go to jail, you know, and if you roll a 7, you go to jail. You know, you want to figure out, oh, how often will that happen? You know, these are things that you'll learn how to calculate those things. So there's a lot of game aspects to data and probability too. Probability
is really fun. When you guys start studying that, I think you'll really like it. It's one of the best parts of math.
And yes, yep. You need to know your decimal fractions and percentages for sure.
Mm-hmm. The numbers between 0 and 1 are where like I do all my work. How many brands of cars are there? That Waymo uses, I think we usually just are working with one at a time. But we've had different brands of cars over time. The next one, the one that we're developing right now, is a Jaguar I-Pace. So there's just one. I think in the future we'd expect to have a couple of different types of things depending on people's needs. So we might have like a minivan, we might have, you know, we do have trucks, we have semi-trucks too. But we might have different types of vehicles for people to hail if they need different types of transportation. Are they fragile? I mean, the car itself is like if it hits something, it would be just a car. It's pretty sturdy. The computers are in the trunk, and they're protected. but you know, they're still computers. so if the car like did get in an accident, or if the, you know, the driver who was responsible for the car accidentally backed it into a pole or something, we do take that car off the road, and we make sure it's all fixed before we put it back on the road, because you know, a functioning computer, or a computer that's working, is very important for this. There are Waymo trucks. You might see them actually around California, because they drive around. There's not too many of them yet, because we're just starting that up. But trucking is also a field where we think there's a lot of space for self-driving technology, because there are people right now who drive trucks really, really long distances. It's a hard job. You have to be very careful. You have to pay a lot of attention for a really long time. You're driving something that could hurt people if you're not paying attention. And often you have to be on the road like for days at a time. You might drive across the country and then have to drive back, and that's pretty hard on people. So we think that having a truck that can do that itself would make the road safer, and would, you know, free up people to do things that aren't quite so taxing on them. Does Waymo car have it here? I think you're probably asking if like there's Waymo cars in California. There are Waymo cars in California that you'll see around. A lot of them, we're just getting data. So they're just collecting information about the roads. Some of them are taking Waymo employees places, but you cannot right now, as a person who doesn't work for Waymo, like hail it like a taxi in California. You can do that in Phoenix, Arizona. All right. Well, it was so nice talking to you all. I'm excited that there's so much interest in STEM careers.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. This was awesome. So students, you're going to go back to your original classroom on your link. Teachers, do you want to chime in with any other directions?
Yeah, can I do that? So this is Mr.